With housing prices continuing to surge across the Seoul metropolitan area, President Lee Jae-myung is seeking public input as the government prepares a new round of measures. Buoyed by a semiconductor-led economic upswing, the Korean government has set an ambitious target of achieving 3% growth this year. Korea's ICT exports reached a record high in the first half of the year, accounting for more than half of the country's total exports. Korea is weighing another round of housing market measures as soaring prices in the capital region prompt President Lee Jae-myung to seek public input before moving ahead. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin starts us off.
As the Korean government prepares new measures to rein in soaring housing prices in the capital area, President Lee Jae-myung says it's time to listen.
의견을 최대한 많이 들어본다. 합리적인 의견으로.
Lee's remarks came as government ministries kicked off a 3-day series of policy forums on Tuesday to gather ideas. Experts and members of the public will discuss 3 key areas: housing supply, finance and loans, and real estate taxation. Describing housing as Korea's biggest challenge, President Lee called on his cabinet to identify the key issues for productive discussions.
워낙 복잡하고 또 예민하고 또 아주 사소해 보이는 것도 엄청난 영향을 미치는 중요 의제라서 근데 얘기하자면 끝이 없는데 또 어쨌든 중요한 거거든요. 이런 걸 뽑아야 얘기가 돼요. 안 그러면
One of the most contentious topics is whether owners of higher value homes should pay higher property taxes. President Lee even asked viewers watching the cabinet meeting live for their opinions.
초고가에 대해서는 좀 차별적으로 부담시키는 게 좋겠다. 에 동의하시면 1번, 그거 아니다 2번 한번 눌러주시면 좋겠습니다.
The result?
대부분의 댓글이
네.
1번입니다.
비중이 얼마나 돼요?
1번 한 90%대 10%.
초고가 주택은 실거주 1주택이라도 좀 강화하자는 점에 대해서는 대체적으로 동감하는 것 같네요.
The discussions come as apartment prices in Seoul have risen for 74 consecutive weeks as of the first week of July. The ideas raised during this week's ministry-led discussions will feed into a final meeting chaired by President Lee next week before the government unveils its new housing measures as early as this month. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
With the economy gaining momentum on the back of a semiconductor boom, the government has set its highest growth target in 5 years, aiming for 3%. Our Baek Joo-hee has more.
Unveiling its economic strategy for the second half of the year on Tuesday, the government has significantly upgraded the country's growth outlook. The real GDP growth forecast for this year has been revised upwards to 3%, a substantial leap from its initial 2% projection. If achieved, this will mark the highest growth rate since 2021. Meanwhile, nominal GDP growth, which includes inflation, is projected to reach 12.3%, marking the highest level in 3 decades. The adjustment comes as rising chip exports lead to faster corporate investment across the country. Accordingly, the government officially announced its new 345 vision to achieve a fundamental turnaround for the Korean economy.
올해가 잠재 성장률 3%, 세계 무역 4강, 국민소득 5만 불이라는 대체 불가 대한민국으로 도약하는 원년으로 기억될 수 있게 힘을 모아주시길 부탁드립니다.
To achieve this, Korea is accelerating its 3 major mega projects centered on semiconductors and AI. On top of that, new super innovation projects such as sensors and next-generation secondary batteries will be newly designated for aggressive development. With strong tax revenues, the government will provide massive funding to secure these advanced technologies. Also, the government has identified young people and talent development as its core investment targets. This comes amid persistent global risks and a sluggish recovery in the domestic construction sector. In response, the government has pledged to train 200,000 young specialists in high-tech fields and create 200,000 new job opportunities. Officials also promised to quickly address regional gaps and the economic divide between industries. To counter the risk of a triple high inflation, high interest rates, and high exchange rates, the government will deploy full-scale stabilization measures, including large-scale food discounts and flexible energy price controls. Baek Joo-hee, Arirang News.
Korea's ICT exports reached a record high in the first half of the year, making up more than half of the country's total exports. Kim Bo-kyung has more.
South Korea's information and communications technology exports reached a record high in the first half of this year. According to a report released by the Ministry of Science and ICT on Tuesday, outbound shipments totaled $253.86 billion between January and June, up 120.5% from the same period last year. With ICT exports hitting a fresh high, it accounted for over 50% of the country's total exports, marking the first time the sector has contributed more than half of overall exports. Strong exports of semiconductors and solid-state drives, or SSDs, were backed by growing investment in artificial intelligence, together accounting for 83.7% of total ICT exports. Semiconductor exports surged 162.5% on-year to a record $192.43 billion, driven by strong demand for AI chips and high memory prices. Exports of computers and communications equipment jumped 233.8% to $22.16 billion, largely due to a surge in SSD exports. Meanwhile, mobile phone exports rose 38% to $8.4 billion, while display exports went up by 3.8% to over $9 billion. Exports expanded across all major markets. Exports to China, including Hong Kong, rose 141% to $101.16 billion, accounting for the largest share, while exports to the United States surged 215.6% to $45.44 billion. ICT imports totaled over $93 billion in the first half, up over 31% from a year earlier. But the ICT trade surplus still reached $160.65 billion, already surpassing the previous annual record of $113.22 billion set in 2018, despite covering only the first 6 months of the year. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Britain's Princess Anne, the daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, has met President Lee Jae-myung here in Seoul to discuss bilateral cooperation. Their discussion on Tuesday reportedly included measures to boost cooperation between the two countries, including shipbuilding, trade, and investment. Earlier in the day, she and her spouse, Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, visited HD Hyundai Heavy Industries headquarters in Ulsan to discuss shipbuilding and maritime cooperation. The couple also visited South Korea this week to commemorate British sacrifices during the Korean War. Tonight, Korea's ruling and opposition parties have failed once more to break a deadlock over control of parliamentary committees, more than a month since the second half of the Assembly's four-year term began. And at the same time, a fast-tracked overhaul of the prosecutors' investigative powers is opening new fault lines, both between the parties and within the ruling camp itself. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun joins us in the studio to tell us more. Welcome, Hae-ryun.
Good evening, Tammy.
So, Hae-ryun, what happened in today's talks? Let's begin with that.
So another round of negotiations actually broke down this afternoon, Tammy, and the ruling Democratic Party floor leader Han Byung-do and his People Power Party counterpart Chung Jung-sik met under National Assembly Speaker Cho Jung-sik, but neither side moved. The talks stumbled on two issues, such as how to appoint a special counsel to investigate the shortage of ballot papers during last month's local elections, and how to divide the Assembly's remaining 7 standing committee chairs. Speaker Cho, who has already delayed a resolution once this month, again pressed both parties to finish forming committees before Constitution Day this Friday. Chung left the meeting reportedly visibly frustrated, accusing the Democratic Party of pressuring the opposition rather than negotiating in good faith.
The DP should unilaterally amend the National Assembly Act so the largest party formally monopolizes all 18 chairs and take them that way. Stop pretending negotiations exist while using intimidation and pointless delay instead.
Han, for his part, maintains the DP has shown patience and the opposition hasn't reciprocated, pointing to its refusal to submit a committee member list. The DP already elected 11 of the 18 chairs unilaterally on June 30th, including the powerful Legislation and Judiciary Committee, prompting the PPP's continuing boycott of Assembly business.
Well, speaking of the Legislation and Judiciary Committee, what's currently happening there on the prosecutorial reform front?
And like you said, this is the major next front. And even without the opposition present, the DP has kept the Legislation and Judiciary Committee running. Its subcommittee is reviewing a bill currently that would abolish prosecutors' so-called supplementary investigation authority. And this is the power that lets a prosecutor step back into a police-led case and investigate further if gaps remain. The party argues that removing this authority is the final piece of a broader prosecutorial reform launched last year, which already abolished the prosecution service's old structure and created separate agencies for indictment and major crime investigations.
Completing prosecutorial reform means finishing a criminal justice system that serves the public. Now, revising the Criminal Procedure Act to fully abolish supplementary investigation authority will complete the final piece of prosecutorial reform.
The PPP disagrees and plans to introduce its own bill this week, preserving that authority, warning that removing it would be to concentrate too much power within the police. And notably, some DP lawmakers are also urging caution after allegations of police misconduct surfaced in a recent case. And one lawmaker is drafting an exception that would preserve prosecutors' oversight in cases involving vulnerable victims, such as those affected by sexual violence or abuse of the elderly.
And Hae-ryun, before I let you go, and what's happening within the ruling party itself?
So the DP is actually preparing for its own leadership contest. So the former party leader Chung Cheong-rae declared his candidacy on Monday yesterday, completing a five-way race for the August 17th convention alongside former Prime Minister Kim Min-seok and lawmakers Song Young-gil and Ko Min-jung, among others. And that race has already produced some friction. The party Supreme Council decided today, on Tuesday, to introduce a preferential voting system for the leadership vote, a move contested by lawmakers seen as close to Chung Cheong-rae. It's worth watching closely as the party running the government, whoever emerges from this race, will shape how the DP wields its majority once committee formation is settled, including the pace of the very reform agenda we've been discussing tonight.
Well, it certainly sounds like the National Assembly is heading into a busy few days on multiple fronts. Hae-ryun, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
U.S. President Donald Trump has pledged to degrade Tehran's military capabilities related to the Strait of Hormuz, while proposing a security fee on cargo shipments passing through the critical waterway. Kim Jun-hong explains.
The U.S. military says it resumed strikes against Iran on Monday. In a social media post, U.S. Central Command said it began a third straight night of attacks. According to CNN, the operation targeted Iranian military assets, while Iranian state media later reported explosions in the port city of Bandar Abbas. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump said the goal was to eliminate Iran's capabilities related to the Strait of Hormuz.
We are just going forward. We're attacking them tonight. We're taking out all of their capability for anything having to do with the Strait, with the Hormuz Strait.
This comes just hours after Trump signaled more strikes against Iran as hostilities between the two countries resumed last week. During a radio interview, Trump vowed the U.S. would hit Iran very hard that night and again the next day. He also described the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran as a test he would rather have avoided, saying it didn't mean much. Earlier that day, Trump said the U.S. would charge ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz for security. He proposed a fee equal to 20% of each vessel's cargo value. The move reverses his administration's stance just last month that any fees or tolls on the international waterway would violate international law. Meanwhile, the UAE Defense Ministry said Tuesday that 2 tankers were hit by Iranian cruise missiles while transiting the Strait of Hormuz. The announcement came shortly after the U.S. military launched a new wave of strikes on Iran. 1 Indian crew member was killed and 8 others were wounded. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said on Telegram that it had struck vessels that it described as rogue supertankers. It claimed the ships switched off their navigation systems, ignored warnings, and attempted to enter a mined route in the strait. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
In Venezuela, nearly 3 weeks after the devastating twin earthquakes, tens of thousands remain missing as aftershocks continue to challenge recovery efforts. Shin So-won reports.
Venezuela has struggled for weeks in the aftermath of a devastating series of earthquakes, with recovery efforts hampered by continued aftershocks in a deepening economic crisis. Since the initial earthquake struck on June 24, rescue crews have been working to clear vast amount of debris, but supportive measures continue to be halted by persistent aftershocks, with more than 1,220 recorded so far. Authorities say the death toll has risen to at least 4,561, while another 16,740 people have been injured. The earthquakes also caused widespread infrastructure catastrophe, leaving more than 850 buildings damaged, including nearly 200 that were completely destroyed.
I saw my grandmother die. I was there. She was moaning in pain, but I alone couldn't do anything. My uncle's wife was underneath my grandmother, and she told me she was talking to my grandmother, that she was also alive.
Residents continue to struggle with limited access to essential services, including housing and healthcare, while nearly 18,000 people remain displaced in temporary shelters. The ongoing seismic threat has left many living in fear and mourning their losses amid pressure on survival.
It's tough, brother. No, this hasn't been easy. We're still on edge about this whole situation. Today I've come down to fish, but, well, thank God we're alive and well. Many people are dead, this whole thing.
Beyond the humanitarian crisis, the disaster is also intensifying economic pressure on Venezuela. The country's monthly inflation rate rose to 13.8% in June, more than double May's figure, pushing inflation for the first half of the year to 129.8%. Economists say uncertainty surrounding reconstruction along with soaring demand for U.S. dollars has weakened Venezuela's currency, the bolivar.
The third priority is to maintain the objective of debt restructuring. We are also continuing to refine the macroeconomic framework and debt sustainability analysis, incorporating the economic impact of the earthquakes.
While Venezuelan officials say recent gains in oil production have raised cautious hopes of an economic recovery, economists warn that rising reconstruction costs and supply chain disruption could fuel further inflation and prolong the country's financial crisis. Shin So-won, Arirang News.
South Korea is marking North Korean-born Citizens Day today, an annual observance honoring those who have settled here in the South. And this year's event comes as the Unification Ministry introduces a new official term for the community. Kim Do-yeon tells us more.
The song Longing for Kumgangsan Mountain opened Tuesday's main ceremony for South Korea's 3rd annual North Korean-born Citizens Day. More than 1,000 North Korean-born citizens and government officials gathered at Kintex in Gov't-do Province to mark the occasion. President Lee Jae-myung also delivered a message pledging the administration's support.
Adapting to an unfamiliar society and starting anew is never easy. You must have endured immense difficulties learning new skills, meeting new people, and carving out your own place.
Under the theme, Embracing Our Home, Bridging Peace, participants had the chance to connect with fellow North Korean-born citizens in South Korea who shared the unique experience of building a new life. From college students to public service workers, attendees shared their resettlement journeys. They highlighted both their successes and the ongoing hardships of facing social prejudice in a new community.
My job involves handling civil complaints, but because my hometown is Musan in Hamgyong-do Province, my voice tone is quite high. Callers have often mistaken me for a voice fisher.
To date, South Korea has recorded a cumulative total of 34,600 North Koreans who have resettled in the South. The Ministry of Unification vowed to improve the practical foundations for long-term social integration, including the changing of the term from North Korean defectors to North Korean-born citizens.
This year, for the first time, we mark this day using the term North Korean-born citizens. A name defines identity, and its history is complex. The term defector harbors discrimination and exclusion, instantly bringing back painful memories of the past.
Interactive booths were set up across the venue, providing customized information on local community services and educational programs. With Tuesday designating the official day for North Korean-born citizens, this entire week is marked as a period of national celebration. Until the end of the week, local governments across the country will host cultural events and forum discussions. The nationwide campaign aims to foster better public understanding and build an inclusive environment for the North Korean-born community. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Marking 2 decades of cooperation along the East Asian-Australasian Flyway, an international forum has been held in Incheon City, home to globally important wetlands that provide vital habitats for migratory water birds. Our To Young-eun has this report.
The black-faced spoonbill, one of the world's rarest water birds, was once on the brink of extinction. Its global population fell below 400 in the 1990s, leading to its classification as endangered on the IUCN Red List. Today, the population has rebounded to more than 7,000, and the species has been reclassified as vulnerable. Its remarkable recovery is regarded as one of the greatest conservation success stories along the East Asian-Australasian Flyway, where governments, conservation experts, and partner organizations have worked together to protect migratory birds and their habitats.
Well, the black-faced spoonbill has been one of our 7 flagship species. And so I think now we have a model about how to make the saving of a species work.
Experts say protecting migratory birds begins with protecting their habitats, especially coastal wetlands. As rapid urbanization and coastal development continue across the region, experts stress that no single country can protect biodiversity alone.
It's important that these efforts at the region are also not just promoted and sustained across the 11 member states of ASEAN, but across generation, because our efforts will continue beyond several generations.
Korea provides a strong example of such cooperation, with its tidal flats serving as important breeding and feeding grounds for endangered species. Since the Korean tidal flats were inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2021, efforts to protect and manage the sites have been strengthened through closer cooperation between local governments and international partners. Experts say such global recognition helps highlight the importance of conserving habitats and maintaining ecological connectivity.
Korea's West Coast tidal flats are exceptionally rich in biodiversity, providing abundant food resources for migratory birds. Preventing the loss and degradation of these wetlands is therefore essential to protecting their feeding grounds. Resting areas are also important, but continued coastal development has left birds with fewer places to rest when the tide comes in.
After the momentum built here over the past 2 decades, there are even stronger calls for long-term cooperation, with the future of biodiversity depending on shared global commitments extending beyond national borders. To Young-eun, Arirang News.
We're seeing heavy rain in Seoul right now. Typhoon Bobby, the ninth storm of the season, is sending plenty of moisture our way, and that's bringing rain to the country. Through tonight, the central regions and Jeollabuk-do Province could see heavy downpours with 20 to 50 millimeters of rain an hour. And northern Gyeonggi-do Province could pick up more than 120 millimeters, while Chungcheong-do and the Jeollado provinces will see 20 to 80 millimeters of rain. But it's not just the rain you'll want to watch. Strong winds are also picking up nationwide. Seoul is under a strong wind advisory, so please take extra care if you're heading out. And even with the rain, the heat isn't going anywhere. Tomorrow will be a little cooler than today, but with plenty of humidity in the air, it'll feel hot and sticky. Seoul will start the day at 24 degrees Celsius and Daegu 26 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul and Daejeon will climb up to 30 degrees, while Gyeongju will soar to 37 degrees. Another round of monsoon rain will move into the southern regions and Jeju Island starting Thursday. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Da-mi. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
When did it all begin? The beginning of joy embedded in daily life, where steps of learning meet a bigger world, and history coexists. The legend continues. Innovative technologies come together to unfold a new future, building a better tomorrow. A joy accessible to all, always present in your daily life. JDC.
Knock knock. The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Pony Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like the total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. The United States and Iran appear to be moving closer to a wider conflict. President Trump has vowed to keep striking Iran, while the U.S. has resumed its naval blockade and announced plans to charge transit fees for ships using the Strait of Hormuz, a move that has sparked international criticism. With military pressure mounting and President Trump set to deliver a national address later this week, attention is now turning to whether Washington is preparing for a longer campaign or whether there's still a path back to diplomacy. For more on this, we connect to Robert Lawrence, professor of English and Turkic Studies at Dongduk Women's University. A very big welcome.
Thank you for having me on this evening.
And also joining us is Kim Young-jin, National Security College professor at the Korean National Defense University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start a discussion first with Professor Lawrence. Let's begin with President Trump's message. He said he'll strike Iran today and tomorrow while calling the ceasefire MOU a little more than a test. Do you think the conflict has now entered a fundamentally new phase?
Well, we're definitely in an escalatory phase. You know, we'll have to wait and see how things develop to know if it's new or if it's more cyclical. You know, if there's an expansion of the target list, or if the conflict spills over into the broader region, or if it even spills beyond the region as Iran has threatened to do, then maybe we're looking at a new phase. You know, a lot's unfolding as we speak. So by the time we wake up tomorrow morning, we might be looking at a different situation. But there are a couple of developments, I think, that are flying under the radar that need to be addressed. You know, one, Donald Trump sent a letter to Congress on July 10th stating that, you know, officially letting them know that strikes began on July 7th to protect Americans and U.S. interests. Now, what that does is, you know, the administration is going to argue that this gives them 60 more days to operate without congressional approval, since he had already written them in early May that the war with Iran had officially terminated. I'm sure that many in Congress are going to reject this argument. There's going to be a lot of pushback. But I think the administration is going to maintain that this gives them a new 60-day period in which to operate without congressional approval. This is important because I think for all intents and purposes, and right or wrong, it kind of eliminates a congressional restraint for the time being anyway, assuming that Congress won't really have the bandwidth right now to challenge him on it. Additionally, in the last 24 hours, the Houthis fired 8 missiles, as of the last time I counted, into Saudi Arabia in retaliation for a strike on the Sana'a airport at which an Iranian plane was trying to land, or a plane from Iran was trying to land. You know, the Houthis blamed the Saudis, they retaliated, and then they threatened more retaliation. So I think it's going to be crucial to see how the Iranians, the Houthis, and the Saudis all react to this development, because it could broaden the scope of the conflict. For example, the Saudis could retaliate against the strikes from the Houthis, or the Iranians or Houthis could send, more strikes into Saudi Arabia. Furthermore, the Houthis could, because of this, and as well with the U.S. blockade of Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, they could use this as an encouragement to maybe cause some more trouble in the Red Sea. There's a lot of oil that's bypassing the Strait of Hormuz by going out through the East-West pipeline across Saudi Arabia, then going out the Bab al-Mandab through the Red Sea, through the Bab al-Mandab and over to Asia. So if the Houthis decide to engage in the Red Sea, this could be, an energy security problem that could have global ramifications. So right now, it seems like we're in a position of controlled escalation, but the law of unintended consequences probably suggests that we need to wait and see how things develop in the coming days and weeks, maybe.
Right, definitely. So we're seeing a lot of factors playing into this current situation. But if you go back to the latest strikes by the U.S., Washington targeted Iran's missile and naval capabilities rather than its nuclear facilities. Professor Kim, what does that tell us about the military strategy of Washington?
It is very natural because the targeting nuclear facility will be the disaster, especially for the civilian casualties. So main strategic objective of the U.S. by targeting naval and missile capability is to lead the Iranian agreement to nuclear negotiation that the U.S. wanted. Over the weeks, the U.S. President Donald Trump has shown dissatisfaction over Iranian approach to negotiation deal packages. So the U.S. wanted Iran to give up their nuclear enrichment fuel facility and kind of the weapons and duty for inspection. But Iranian has hesitated to accept this kind of a requirement from the U.S. So this limited attack, like the including naval capability or missile site aiming at the Iranians' participation on nuclear deals that the U.S. has set. But Iran seems to not give up their nuclear capability, including fuel, material, and facilities. So this conflict will be continue for a while, and nobody knows when it will be start at this time.
Right. But meanwhile, on the side of Iran, it has also stepped up pressure on U.S. bases and Gulf allies across the region. How much of a challenge do you think that could pose for the United States?
It seems at the moment the U.S. wanted to deal with Iran as soon as possible, but Iran want all Gulf states to join this extended war and extend this conflict in for the longer war, because Iran wanted to the longer conflict to lure the U.S. as long as possible in this region. Iran expect someday American people will sick and tired of this Middle East participation and give up their participation in this issue. So they expect the American people want to withdraw its U.S. forces from the Middle East as soon as possible. That's why Iran does not want to have any reason to hurry up this negotiation package war, kind of a shortage war. So, but the U.S. wanted to have a deal as soon as possible to end this conflict in this region and deal negotiation package as well. So Iran want to have a more advantage over the strait by using a deal with the U.S. and the U.S. has a very difficult situation to stop this the conflict as soon as possible. So the U.S. midterm election is coming in this November. Iran has more advantage over the time frame.
More ways to apply pressure, indeed. Now, if we shift a little bit to the Strait of Hormuz, the United States has resumed its naval blockade and even proposed charging ships a 20% transit fee. Professor Lawrence, how could that change the balance of leverage between Washington and Tehran?
This is really the crux of the issue. The Strait of Hormuz is. The two states have competing interpretations of Article 5 of the MOU, and this is what's led to the recent escalation. Currently, the Strait of Hormuz is the strategic center of gravity, and disrupting the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz is the Iranians' biggest strategic asset. So controlling and leveraging the strait through kind of asymmetric warfare and basically patience could be a significant source of revenue and leverage in the international arena for the Iranians. The U.S. obviously does not see this as a feasible outcome, and that's why they resumed strikes on storage and launch sites. And they're doing this to degrade Iran's ability to impede the free flow of traffic. The Straits also where Iran is vulnerable for its own oil exports that make up a considerable amount of government revenue. So, resuming this naval blockade is significant because even though the blockade wasn't 100% successful last time, Iran was able to sneak some ships through. It still costs billions of dollars, up to $6 billion in 1 month, according to, I think, Al Jazeera in one report. It created a storage crisis and it caused significant, financial strain in general to the country. So this is an effective tactic. But the critical value of the blockade, it may come down to strategic discipline and pain tolerance because it's going to hurt everybody involved. Regarding the 20% fee that President Trump has proposed, I think that there are a lot of logistical hurdles to actually make this happen. I'm not sure that it isn't just kind of hyperbole, given what some of the recent statements from Secretary Marco Rubio and Ambassador Waltz in the UN. So, time will tell, but I think that there are a lot of hurdles with this, and I think there's going to be a great deal of pushback from the international community, basically from everybody in the business community as well.
Right. As you've mentioned, it's really going to hurt everybody involved, and that proposal really has drawn international criticism. Then, Professor Lawrence, how could this affect America's relations with its allies and the broader international community?
Well, the U.S. has been rallying the international community against the Iranians imposing fees and obstructing the freedom of navigation through the Straits for months. So, while the naval blockade of Iran, it's in accordance to the law of naval warfare, there's really no legal basis for the U.S. imposing a fee on the Strait of Hormuz. This would encourage the Iranians to do the same. And it would also, encourage their claim that there is ownership of what the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea considers to be an international waterway. In fact, Foreign Minister Arakchi earlier on today agreed with President Trump in saying that, countries that do guarantee safe passage deserve compensation. So, while Donald Trump is predictably unpredictable, I think this is not a serious goal of his. This would be awfully ambitious for one to even try to do it. It would hurt the U.S. argument against Iran doing the same. It would be very difficult, if not impossible, to maintain indefinitely. And it wouldn't sit well with any of our allies. So, I think this is probably a part of a negotiation tactic rather than an actual policy.
But if we look ahead, there's going to be another ambitious plan. The U.S. says it's prepared to expand its air campaign as well. Professor Kim, do you think Washington has the weapons and stockpile to sustain a broader operation?
For a short time, the U.S. has enough capability and capacity to target Iranian military facility by using their air campaign. Air campaign means not just total war, it's a limited attack for a short term. So American people does not support the longer war with Iran. So the U.S. will do short and very strong limited attack to Iran by using maximum pressure rather than a longer war by using grounded forces. So of course the U.S. does not have unlimited ammunition, and Iran has the same issue. The U.S. operation will be short but very strong, but it is uncertain whether it will be successful or not to deal with Iran because of Iran has more the advantage over the time frame. So the U.S. air campaign will be very short-term, strong attack to a limited target of the Iran.
Right, so a very uncertain situation that we're seeing right now. But in just a couple of days, we're expecting President Trump to make an address later this week, with many expecting him to outline the next phase of the U.S. policy towards Iran. Then what should we be watching for, Professor Lawrence? And do you think, do you still see any realistic path towards diplomacy?
I'm sure he'll address a number of issues, but regarding Iran, I think it'll be interesting to see if he offers clear justification and objectives. This is something that the administration was heavily criticized for not clearly providing enough of in February and March. And I think, the narrative was lost in the information space because of this deficit in clear communication. There were a lot of people within his own base that were not and are not happy with the decision to engage in Iran in February. And they maintained that it strayed away from his America First agenda. So with the midterms coming up and the Republicans having small majorities in both the House and the Senate, and frankly, the House doesn't look particularly good for the Republicans right now. I think he'll want to control the narrative much better than he did earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. Regarding returning to diplomacy, both sides seem to be leaving the door open for diplomacy, which is good, but they're doing so in kind of a controlled escalation of kinetic warfare. So that makes, that complicates actually getting back to the table a great deal. There's also, a lot of potential for missteps to lead to uncontrolled escalation right now. So in this environment, I doubt either side is willing to show weakness and kind of rush back to the table too quickly. Though it does appear that neither side wants to return to where we were in early March. Eventually people are going to have to talk, but whether and for whom time is an asset or a vulnerability is a big question right now. So I don't expect any big change to happen immediately. Both sides are going to try to demonstrate that they aren't fazed by the escalation. And again, it might come down to who has the greater strategic focus and pain tolerance.
Right. So as Professor Lawrence just pointed out, it seems both sides want to avoid an all-out war, but tensions, of course, are rising continuously. Then, Professor Kim, what do you think is the biggest risk for further escalation?
Yes, that's the dilemma. Both the U.S. and Iran do not want to extend the war and do not want any longer war, but nobody knows whether this limited conflict became a longer war or bigger war. And the biggest factor will be maybe Israel. Israel wants to change the Middle East security environment by maximum pressure on Iran and Hezbollah by this time. Thus, it is uncertain when this conflict will be stopped and when Israel and Iran stop their conflict. So the U.S. may live in a short term in some day, but Middle East conflict will be continuous. So Israel attack on Iran or Hezbollah will be the biggest factor in deciding the further escalation.
Mm-hmm. A concerning situation and scenario indeed. So if we look beyond the military situation, Professor Lawrence, the U.S.'s naval blockade, the transit fee for ships in the Strait of Hormuz, all of this, what impact could it have on the global economy?
Well, if this were to go into effect, it would have a very bad effect on the world economy. According to the Financial Times today, it's going to add approximately $32 million to every supertanker going through the strait. Naturally, this is going to lead to increased oil prices. We've already seen a bit of a spike in oil prices in the last couple of days, and it would have cause a negative supply shock. We would have higher cost of food, transportation, and manufacturing, leading to inflation, and which would lower economic output and global growth as a whole. So, in addition to all the economic consequences in implementing this policy, the U.S. would become guilty of what it has accused Iran of illegally trying to do for months. So, again, I don't think that this 20% fee is likely to come into effect. Maybe it's something that we're going to see the president address on Friday night here in Korea, Friday morning here in Korea, Thursday night in the U.S. But, though he's not necessarily someone scared of unorthodox foreign policy, I think that this is a bridge too far. I think this is more likely a tool to throw everybody off balance, as he kind of has a tendency to do.
So it could be rather a strategic message than a real action plan moving forward. But finally, before we conclude our discussion tonight, so Iran's new leadership is now formally in place following Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral. Professor Kim, what message do you think Tehran is trying to send, and how could it impact the current overall situation?
There was a huge impact over the funeral ceremony. Then the anti-U.S. campaign was very strong, and "Killing Trump" slogan became main slogan among Iranian people. Iranian regime, definitely will use this kind of anti-U.S. movement for their long-term dictatorship and press any democratic and anti-regime movement for a while. To Iranian regime, this will be a great chance to maintain their dictatorship for next decade, and they will use this as long as possible for their interests. So that is the kind of a turning point for the more difficult situation between Iran and the U.S. But Iranian regime does not want any kind of a short deal, and the U.S. want to stop this kind of the conflict as soon as possible. So this type of a funeral ceremony anti-U.S. movement is a very difficult the hurdle for the negotiation going ahead.
So we will be watching closely to see what this new leadership means for the future of the conflict as well. That's where we have to leave our discussion tonight. Professor Kim, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Professor Lawrence, we really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.